Lipless crankbaits are one of the most fun bites in, the pre-spawn time, because the bites are absolutely aggressive usually. They'll slack line it, you'll yo-yo that bait up and it'll just knock slack in your line. One of my favorite ways to catch them in the pre-spawn. Use some of these tips, hopefully it'll work on the lake near you. It's getting to be spring of the year, it's still cold in most of the country and it's warming up fast. And I feel like crankbaits get a lot of love, but one bait that doesn't get the credit it's deserved, I guess, is a lipless. And this is a Yo-Zuri Rattling Vibe, my favorite lipless crankbait to throw. And there's a lot of different variations, colors in them, but I kind of want to simplify like my setup on what I do with these Rattling Vibes when I throw a lipless crankbait, and kind of the best scenarios for it when I throw it over, say a normal crankbait, when a lipless shines. So just like you've seen in a lot of my other videos, I keep my color selection pretty simple. The one difference when it comes to liplesses is there's different variations of them. Obviously you got your size differences, like your 3/8 up to your 9/16, which is the main two Yo-Zuri Rattling Vibe sizes. But you've also got different rattling. And what that means is you've got your one knock style, which is what that means is one big bearing in it that has kind of that slow click. And then you've also got your typical Rattling Vibe lipless rattle, which is the higher pitch, lot of BBs. And I wish I could give you an answer on when you just say, oh, today is a one knock type day, or today's the traditional type day. And I don't really think there is that. But what I do is I'll kind of play with both of them, both the different variations. And some days, if they're just eating it, like you hook a fish on it and you can't even see the bait when they come up, well, obviously you're throwing the right one. It's a lot of kind of trial and error to see whether that one knock or that higher pitch noise is better. But a lot of times nowadays, I actually tend to start with the one knock variation. It's just a little more subtler. The fish are pretty pressured on a lot of our lakes nowadays, and it's kind of a little less aggressive, but still got that rattle that a lipless crankbait needs. So when it comes to sizes of these Rattling Vibes, I pretty much keep two sizes in the boat. There's a 3/8 and there's a 9/16, and I throw the heavy one mostly. And it just is, it's the best bait. It's the best weight to kind of stay at the depth you want. If they're eating really small bait, you go down that small one, but that mid-range size is the best for kind of all around scenarios. And when it comes to colors on these, there's really kind of 4 colors that I throw. I really actually probably 3 colors, but then I've got a few I play with here and there. But you need your traditional, your like chrome and blue or chrome and black, anything that's just shiny with kind of a natural colored back. This is one of my go-tos when I think they're eating bait fish on basically anywhere in the country. Is just a typical, this is what I call a shad pattern. I don't throw a ton of the clear translucent shad patterns when it comes to Rattling Vibe, because this is an aggressive bait. Rattles, it's loud, covers water fast. So if they want to eat something in that presentation, I think this chrome color is the best to imitate a shad. And then in Florida specifically, you have to have your golds. In Florida, a lot of those deep south lakes, gold is a go-to, especially in the spring. They love gold. The golden shiners down in Florida, but even on some like, South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama lakes, gold is just a really effective color in that pre-spawn mode, which is when this bait really, really shines, is pre-spawn kind of, 53 to 60 degree water temperatures when this bait is really, really good. It works colder, but that's probably the prime time. So you got your shad, your gold, and then just like in your crankbaits, gotta have your red. I really love this Yo-Zuri red crawl because it's actually a matte finish. When I'm throwing a crawfish pattern, I don't want them to be shiny like a shad. A crawfish isn't shiny. So I love this matte crawl red that Yo-Zuri makes, and you can see this one's called a ton of fish. This is one of my favorites. Throw it a ton. And this matte crawl, I feel like it gets more bites, which is important for the fishermen. I feel like the matte gets more bites than the shiny ones when you're trying to throw a crawl pattern. And the only other color I keep in the boat is this one. It's more of a bright, it's kind of, I said 3, kind of 4, because this is kind of, in my mind, a crawfish-ish pattern. But this color, like a fire tiger, I'll keep in the boat for scenarios, just if I feel like the fish aren't getting my traditional colors really well. This is just another option. But this is also the one knock sound, and this is just a bright, dirty water color. And A Rattling Vibe's a really, really good dirty water bait, but can also be used in clear water. The first BFL I ever won, actually at Lake Hartwell, which is as clear as it comes, was on the chrome and blue Rattling Vibe, actually fishing it deeper, 10 to 15 foot, and yo-yoing it. So it can be a dirty or clear water bait, but it's prime time around grass, like everybody knows, but also just kind of covering water like you would with a crankbait in clear and dirty water, running rock veins, running points, running big flats. A great bait on big flats because you can cover so much water with it. So when it comes to presentation of Lipless, these Rattling Vibes, they're really, really good reeled. That's the way typically people fish it, but I really, really like kind of a yo-yo presentation. Even when I'm in shallow water, it's almost like a drag, if that makes sense. Like you fish a Carolina rig or something, you actually kind of just sweep your rod really slow and let it drop. Then sweep your rod really slow and let it drop. And that's the way I fish this bait, I would say like 90% of the time. I love fishing like that because number one, when they eat it, they generally eat it on that drop, so they get it really, really well. They'll eat the whole bait. A lot of times you can't hardly see it when they come up with it because they like it on that fall. The first time I ever fished Lake Gunnersville, years and years ago in the grass, I didn't do so well in the tournament because I was throwing a Rattling Vibe, but I just didn't catch that many because I was just reeling it, just fishing it wrong. And I talked to a local guy, he kind of taught me this technique of the kind of Carolina rigging this bait. And that's what I did. I went back the next day and fished it much, much slower in a lot of the same areas, just kind of a drag and drop presentation, just to keep it on the bottom or in the grass, on the rock, wherever I was fishing at the time. And the fish ate it so much better like that. I think that kind of intermittent retrieve on this bait gets a lot more bites. But the cool thing about the Rattling Vibe is a lot of lipless baits out there. There's a ton of different ones, but so they all reel kind of at this angle and vibrate as you're reeling it, which makes that rattling noise. But the difference in this Rattling Vibe, when you stop this bait and let it drop, well, like I'm saying with that kind of Carolina rig dragging approach, a lot of baits will kind of ball up on their side and fall, and the hooks will ball up and it just doesn't look natural. Well, the Rattling Vibe, when you stop these baits and fall, they actually flutter as they fall. Still upright, they fall belly first and kind of, I'm not gonna say they vibrate, but they flutter as they fall and they don't ball up. I think that's what makes this one of the most effective lipless baits out there. This is probably, whether you know it or not, pros won't mention it, but unless they're with Yo-Zuri, but this is probably the most thrown lipless bait on the market. I get asked for them all the time at tournaments from pros I won't mention, but this is, if they're biting a lipless bait, this is the bait they throw. So your setup on a lipless bait, it varies a little bit from your typical crankbait setup. I use a fiberglass rod. This is my Good Vibes rod in my Cobb series and arc rods, and it's a composite rod. It's graphite and fiberglass, and what this does is it lets the fish get the bait a lot better. It's got a lot of tip to it. It's not the best rod for precision casting just because it has so much tip, but the fish really, really get the bait when they eat it. So the right rod makes a big difference. And when it comes to line, lipless baits are the one thing. When you're cranking, you generally want small line, but when it comes to liplesses, the line actually, the only thing it doesn't really change the action of the bait, doesn't change a ton, but it changes the depth that bait runs at the speed you're reeling it. So I've been in situations before where I was throwing it in 1-2 foot of water and still wanted to fish it slowly, and I wanted the bigger profile bait. So I'll go up to 20-pound test, and what that allows is the line holds the bait off the bottom. So you can still do a slow retrieve, but your bait doesn't get down in the mud because that line's holding it up. And then vice versa. I've been in situations, like I mentioned, I caught fish at Lake Hartwell deep and 10 to 15 foot on it. I actually went down to 12-pound test to get the same size bait to get more of that flutter, as I mentioned when I drug it, when I like yo-yoed it off the bottom, and to keep that bait deeper and keep decent speed on it. So you can vary your line depending on the depth you want to fish it, essentially, whether it's tall grass, whether it's just shallow in general. Vary your line to do that rather than the weight of the bait is what I like to do. And I throw it on a faster gear ratio reel. A lot of times cranking, you want a 5.4, 6.4, slower reel. But with this Rattling Vibe, most of the fish are eating it on that drop, so I do the sweep maneuver with my rod, and a faster reel takes up that slack really, really quick when they eat it. I use a 7-to-1 G7 arc reel, and opposite of what I would use cranking, where I'd want a slow reel to kind of keep that slow presentation. I do most of the work with a lipless bait with my rod, not with the reel.